The first verse says, "For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost." And immediately after reading that verse, I had known that he came for a purpose to save me, that I was lost. But first I had to accept that this was something I wanted to do. Whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Jesus Christ. It's the scripture that we use on our Facebook page, and I feel like it's a scripture that really identifies what we want to do here on this podcast, which is to really create a family atmosphere and environment and provide that for people, as well as bringing up things that we enjoy in our lives, like sports, like football. And the big thing that's been going around that I've been seeing on the internet, and it's mostly through TikTok, is the revival that's going on Ohio State's campus right now. And that's huge. I mean, last year we saw some revivals in Asbury, which is like a small college down in Kentucky. But being a young man in this world that usually watches football or any sport, to have somebody of that high stature that's involved in sports, that serves Jesus, that wants to be a part of this walk and take something seriously more than themselves and pursue things of Christ, is huge. It's something that I wish I would have had being younger, you know? And
example.
With that being said, there is revival going down at Ohio State University. For most of my adult life and a majority of my young adult life, I really struggled finding somebody to look up to that was walking the right way. And that's where my story really begins, is not having the influence in front of me via a professional athlete or an older adult male or somebody that I thought of as high in stature. So, I mean, you take a look at what's going on down there. You got men who are going to be playing professional football here pretty soon. And they're on the campus worshiping and praising the Lord, singing, leading souls to Him, baptizing other students. And just their heart posture seems genuine. And I want to take that and move into the importance of being a role model and being somebody that is on fire for God and really bringing that to life. So my story starts, my mom was saved when I was 5 years old. It happened to be after 9/11. And I remember the early stages of my mom's walk. It was a struggle. She didn't really know anything, so she just did her best as to bring her kids to church and kind of raise us up the way that she is now picturing to be right. And stepping into that, I really struggled with having a split family. My mom was a single mom until I was about 9 or 10 years old. A couple days of the week we would move from my mom's house to my dad's house, and then every other weekend we would be with my dad. So it was like living in two different worlds. One world was full of Christ, the church, or trying to be that way, and the other one was, the regular worldly lifestyle that we all are born into. And I just remember being torn a lot and not really understanding, not asking questions, and kind of just going with the flow of things. Some of the stuff that I'm going to tell you is kind of the first time that I've ever said certain things. And most of my time in elementary school through high school, I really struggled making real genuine connections with peers. I always wanted to be, I guess, noticed in a sense, or felt like approval from other people and kind of making a connection with them. I always felt like I was always giving 110% to everybody else around me, and I never really had that feeling reciprocated. And I really struggled with the fact that I always felt like I was being genuine and others weren't. And that was a problem that I really had. And they could have been really genuine. But later on, I didn't really understand the impact of growing up in a broken family. It's so common now that families are split, the dad's gone or the mom's gone or the kids are being raised by grandparents. And to me that was normal, being in a split family. So it wasn't until my early 20s that I really identified and saw the impact it did have on me as a child. And when you finally get to be an adult and you understand certain things and you see how you acted, it's not excuses, it's just the reality of the circumstance. And for me, I didn't like bullies, but I was kind of a jerk to people in school.
Would you say that dealt from confusion as to what it was you were looking for out of someone? Like you said yourself, you weren't, you were living one way with one side of the family, and then you go and, next week you're living a different way. So I assume the households you were growing up in, it didn't exactly give you a structured way of being.
Yeah, expectations were always high, but expectations differed based on where I was at. You take constructive criticism from your parents and you obey, but even parents mess up. And there came a point in my reality where I thought that I just wasn't heard, and it wasn't a reality that I had thought of until I reached my adult life. It didn't come up in my head at the time, but I guess the innate ability to push that away and the human side of just trying to figure out an outlet to release that. My outlet was, I was a small kid. Mm-hmm. I was constantly picked on by older kids when I was little, but I also had a very hot temper. I feel like I did well in school, but I was always a class clown, trying to look for attention in certain situations or approval, getting people to laugh. And it was more like trying to make myself into something that others wanted to be around and not really who I was. And so I really struggled with that up until high school. And then I felt like I made more genuine connections, and I do have friends still from high school. A lot of them I don't talk to. A few of them I'm still in contact with. I still love them all to death. I wish nothing but the best for them, but you grow and things happen, and I'm going to go into more detail on that. But high school, it was like I created something. I was wearing a lot of masks. I was always the guy that wanted to make the most of the moment. So if I was hanging out with friends, I would think of some sort of idea that would be a really good memory to look back on, that we could have and that I could be a part of. So I would always do something funny or do something dangerous or, just anything you could think of. I was always trying to be not the center of attention, but the center of trying to establish memories that we all could look on in the future. And you come to the realization that that stuff really doesn't matter once you grow up. And the real struggle that I had was constantly getting involved in relationships with women, or constantly feeling the need to be with somebody. At a young age, you're a teenage boy, you're going through the hormonal stages, and to me, all I wanted was a girlfriend all the time, and I didn't feel like I was good enough. So when I had somebody give me the attention and thought that I was good looking or good enough to be their boyfriend, I grabbed onto it, and of course I ran with it until it phased out, and then I moved on to somebody else. And my first real relationship was in high school, and then college I was in a pretty serious relationship. But my first year of college is when things got really dark, and like I had said before, grew up in the church, but I always felt like God was somebody that looked at me in disgust, somebody that was constantly judging me for my actions. I felt like I was always under the microscope. The idea of sin was there, and I knew it was what was right and what was wrong, but I just had the thought process of, I'm going to mess up anyways, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm going to do.
You felt like you were too far gone in a way, right?
Yeah, either I was too far gone or I didn't really know how to get there in the first place.
So back up a little bit. So you were living in these split households. So you were going to church when you were with your mom, and then when you weren't with your mom, would you say it was just kind of like chaotic in a way?
It wasn't chaotic. It was just different rules. So if I wasn't allowed to watch, like, say, scary movies at my mom's house, I could watch scary movies at my dad's.
So you had these standards set when you were with one parent that you were expected to abide by, but when you were with the other, you could kind of had free range to. I could see how that'd be confusing, you know.
Yeah.
I'm able to do this when I'm here, and I can't do this when I'm there. So trying to take it serious, trying to take the walk serious at that age when one parent isn't enforcing it. Yeah, I could see how.
I had no intentions of even wanting to take it serious.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I wanted to take it serious. I thought that it was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't understand it. And I think that stems from not having somebody to be able to communicate to me the way that a teenager should have been communicated with for your walk. And, I mean, my mom did great with the knowledge that she had. The Bible says, raise a child up in the way that they should go, and they will not depart. So my mom, I know for sure, really grasped onto that scripture and prayed for us continuously, even if she felt like she was falling short of expectations, or if she didn't know the right way, if you want to put air quotes around that, because there is no right way as far as other than trying to raise the child up in scripture and the love of Jesus. And that can get perverted and that can get twisted. And so my mom did the best she could with what she knew and what she learned based on the revelations she had revealed to her. But now, if you take where I'm at today, my mom, when she was my age, as far as knowledge and I guess you could say wisdom, was not where I'm at. But because of her teaching me at such a young age and really pushing me to go and making me go to these things, it was still drilled in my head even though I didn't want to accept it.
You knew in the back of your mind that there's ways you should be living, and
yeah,
regardless of what you were doing, you know,
yep,
that was still there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't get in a lot of trouble, like serious trouble. I was pretty much a good kid. I was always where I was at. I didn't always necessarily tell the truth as far as what I was doing,
right,
but I always was truthful in the sense of, oh, hey, I'm going to be at so-and-so's house. I was at so-and-so's house doing whatever we were doing. So that is something that I can take pride in, or that I am proud of, I should say, was that I wasn't always in a bad spot, at least at home. I did get in trouble a lot at school, and it was because I wanted to mess around. I wanted to have a good time. I didn't have the patience for school. Yeah, there were some things that I liked, and when I needed to, I would buckle down and I would get good grades, and I did what I needed to do. I was an athlete, so I really loved sports, and in order to play sports at the school I went to, you had to maintain a certain grade average. But I would say later on in my high school career, like probably junior and senior year, things started to shift in my mind where I felt like I was constantly being overlooked. I mean, the worldly system has a scale, and it's all politics. Even if it's not government politics, there's always some sort of structure where you're at, whether it's in work or school. If you have a name, you have a higher standard. So I guess I could rephrase that in a sense of, if you have a good name based on the things that your family or your ancestors did for the community, you were always looked at more highly. If you had a name that wasn't as good or had already been established as troublesome, you carried that with you, especially in a small community. And I'm not here to judge the sins of my ancestors, but when you take a look at the community you live in and the things that family members do, it comes back on the kids, even if you don't want to. So I really battled with the fact that I felt my name was already marked and already against me and already kept me from being able to do certain things that I wanted to do.
You were already in that kind of mindset, so you were self-deprecating and just feeding into that negativity. Yeah, and it carried it over that. It's like you hear someone say, actually, Tua
just said this the other day. There was a discussion about how one of his coaches kept telling him that he sucked and he shouldn't have been there. And it was over and over and over again. He got told he was sucked. And then the new coach comes in and he tells him that he's really good and he was meant for this. And Tua had said, like, you start to hear the same thing over and over again, no matter what, you're going to start believing it.
It becomes your reality.
So, yeah. So when you have people telling you, oh, you're never going to go anywhere, you're never going to do anything, you're stupid, you're ignorant, or you're dumb, and you're not good enough, or you can name anything. You can constantly hear that from the people that are supposed to be building you up, as far as teachers and staff or peers or family members. You start to believe it. Even if you don't want to accept it, it's in there.
Once it's in your mind, I mean, you know, like I know, battling your mind is it's half the battle, you know?
Getting to the point where you knew what the person was going to say and you aligned yourself with it immediately. And you just took on the, okay, I'm going to be something. And I'm going to be exactly what you said I'm going to be. Because then at least I could say you were right. And then I have some sort of means of feeling good about myself because I am something that somebody wanted me to be.
You're making that person proud, even if it's for something that
is completely destroying me.
Wouldn't be deemed as something you'd be proud of.
Yeah.
You know?
I would say my junior and senior year, I really, I was a great athlete. This, I will talk myself up. I was a great athlete. And I always felt like my coaches overlooked me. I felt like I always gave 110%. My effort was always higher than my peers around me, and even some of them would say that. Did I party and mess around and do stupid stuff? Yeah, I did. And that was what backfired, was I wanted to have a good time. My work ethic was really good as far as sports, but the fact that some of these things got back to coaches, they looked at me differently, and then I was punished in a sense of not being elevated to certain positions as far as my sports. So I got to the point where I just was like, you know what, screw it, I don't even care. And then that went with me to college, and this was the first time I was finally by myself. I wasn't forced to go to church, because yes, my parents forced me to go to church, and it was needed and necessary, and that's what they're supposed to do. But I was finally in a place where I didn't have to report to anybody. I didn't have anyone breathing down my back. I could do what I wanted to do. I didn't have to go to church. I didn't have to deal with anything. And I got myself involved in a relationship, and it completely destroyed me. And this was the first time in my life where I had started battling depression, like severely. And I think it was always there. I always had some sort of anxiety, but back then it wasn't something that you always talked about, or wasn't commonplace like it is today.
Especially being a male,
yeah.
I can speak from experience, not having it taken seriously when you post that issue. Is like, I think something's wrong with me. Oh, nothing's wrong with you. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I relate.
And I never even went to anyone and was like, oh, I'm sad, or I'm depressed. It just wasn't something that I did or saw or even thought about doing. I had severe anger issues. I could get instantly mad, 0 to 100 over nothing. And sometimes I still struggle with that today. But it was bad when I was a kid, and I think it stemmed from something in my childhood that either I stored away or something. But that was, I think, the first bit of it. And then in high school, I definitely had some anxiety or something wrong because I was constantly fidgety. I had a real issue with biting my nails. I still do. But I had sports distracting me, so I wasn't in my head all day long.
But then you took that away from yourself.
Yeah, so then I went to a college that I didn't play sports in. I mean, I could have went and played at a small school in Ohio. I could have played baseball or soccer, but the distance, the 6 hours away, is what really scared me from making that commitment. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car then, so it was 6 hours away from literally everybody, and being the first person on my side of the family to go to college was just something I wanted to say I did anyways. I didn't finish, but when I finally got to college and I was by myself and I started really drinking more and doing drugs, like smoking pot is something that I really was heavy into. And I was skipping class. I was going to class like hungover. I was staying up all hours of the night just drinking and drinking and drinking. And then the issues that I had with my relationship really took a toll on me. And it was the first time, I remember it was one night I just was really having suicidal thoughts. Like I really just wanted to be done with everything. And I remember sitting in my bed and having my backpack packed and just ready to call it quits. I was ready to just walk away, walk to a bridge somewhere and just kind of just jump off. And let me tell you something, guys. Just because you are a Christian and you have Jesus and stuff doesn't mean that the enemy won't try to do anything to deter you from your calling. Because after this moment, obviously I'm still here. My stepfather came and picked me up, and it was the next day or 2 days later, I took a leave of absence from school and I went to evening service, midweek service, and I was sitting in the back of the sanctuary of my church, and I kind of looked up to the ceiling and was like, God, if you're real, I need to know, I need to have some sort of experience. And it was in that moment I was completely flooded over with like just peace, but it broke me. Like I fell to the ground, like face down into the carpet, and it just completely started sobbing and just let go. And that was the first encounter I had with God, my first God encounter. And I had been searching, like I wasn't wanting to do anything with Christianity, but I was looking into other religions, like Buddhism and inner peace and New Age stuff, like just trying to find something, because my perspective of the Christian God was somebody that hated me because I messed up all the time. And I never felt I could pray. I felt it was faked, and it was really hard for somebody who was growing up in the church to really understand who God was, because it was constantly there. You know, some people, they go their whole lives, like their whole childhood, not knowing who Jesus is or going to church or what church is, and they step in, and when they have an experience or something happens, like it's immediate to them. It becomes so real. Whereas somebody who's growing up in the church, it becomes more difficult to really grab onto that because you're so used to it. It becomes like a ritual. It becomes like an everyday thing. It's part of your life. And so I had my first encounter, and then I was on fire for a little while, and I was 18 at the time. But the same thing kept bringing me back, and it was constantly relationships, being involved with women. And so like I got involved in another relationship and I fell away, was doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing, and it was like the same process over and over and over again until finally around 2020 I just tired of doing the same stuff over and over again. I ended up getting married in 2018. I had my first son at 22 years old. You know, I was still doing the things that you'd say are of the world, and like drinking and partying and just not going to church, not taking it seriously. I remember one day my 2-year-old son opened up the fridge and he grabbed one of my alcoholic beverages, and like something in my head just clicked. Like you have this moment sometimes where you just a light switch goes off. I'd like to say it was God, but you have these reoccurring moments in your life all the time where something just clicks in your head and you just decide, you make a decision, and that decision's like final and it's for a purpose. And for me in that moment, it was, I think it was either 2020 or 2021. In that moment, I decided I was done drinking. From then on, I haven't had a drink since. And I had the revelation for me that it was a sin and I needed to separate myself from it. It was 2021 when I went to church and I finally sat there and I said, this is what I want to do with my life. This is real. And I go back to the Ohio State players moment because I had wished that there was somebody that I could have looked up to that could have shown me these things at an earlier age for me to understand that it isn't works, it's not religion, it's your relationship. And I finally decided in that moment that I was committing to this. And I had been so afraid my whole life of not having friends because I decided I wanted to be a Christian. My friends would have made fun of me. I was scared what they were going to say, what they were going to think, and what other people were going to think. And I always felt like I was under the radar and everything I did was watched. And I was just so scared of finally committing myself to something that I really wanted to do. And I just never had the courage to do it. When you grow up, you realize that the people that you care about most, as far as friends and stuff, they go on and they move on too. And you lose contact. And then you think to yourself, was it really that bad if I would have decided to do this?
These people are temporary anyways, you know?
Yeah, because they left and they don't care. And then I had my son. So I was still living in the world. I still had friends, but as soon as you have a child, your friends start to separate themselves too. Because one, they either feel awkward around you because you have a kid and they don't feel comfortable being around a kid, or two, they don't want to interfere with your life because they now know that your responsibilities have changed. So it's two separate ends of the spectrum. Both are reality. So then you find yourself even more lonely because now the people that you had been spent 10 to 15 years with are now not talking to you anymore because their lifestyle is now different than your lifestyle. And that changed when I had my son. It changed when I got married because now I have a partner and I can't just go out with my friends whenever I want to and vice versa. And then thinking about, man, everyone would have hated me back then. And it just didn't even matter to me anymore. I was like, either they're going to like me for my decisions and what I really want to do and what I really want to pursue, or they're going to hate me. And I was tired of being fake. I had faked my whole life. From 6th grade to 22 years old, I faked my whole life. I just put on a mask and just gave people everything that they wanted to see, what they wanted, what was going to benefit them. And there was a moment where I had opened my Bible, I was in my living room, and I was reading Matthew 18, and it was verses 11 through 13. The first verse says, "For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost." And immediately after reading that verse, I had known that he came for a purpose to save me, that I was lost. But first I had to accept that this was something I wanted to do. And then I continued to read on further. Verse 12 said, "And what do you think? If a man has 100 sheep, and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray." And for the first time in my life, I had felt that I was actually important, that there was something about me that somebody actually cared about. And then I reread verse 13, because I had heard this scripture about Jesus going and finding the one that leaves the 99, but I didn't pick up the fact that it said, "and if he should find it," meaning that the Lord is constantly seeking. He is constantly searching for us. But there has to be a point where that sheep or yourself wants to be found. And it was in that moment where I finally realized that I wanted to be found, and I wanted to be the person that I was meant to be. And I finally fully surrendered. That became the cornerstone of my return, or my resetting myself and fully committing and establishing the identity that had been given to me through Christ, and learning who I am and what I was supposed to do for him. Not what Keys wanted to do, not what Keys wanted to work towards, not what Keys dreamed of, but I wanted to become the person that was ingrained since the beginning of time, since before I was even here. That leads me to another verse that I stand on. It's Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." So not only did I want to be found, I finally realized that how he thinks of me is how a father should think of me. He wanted to give me nothing but peace, and it was peace that I was searching for and craving, and peace that I couldn't find, peace that I was looking for in women, peace that I was looking for in music, peace that I was looking for in alcohol, in drugs. I couldn't find it. It was always constantly a hole there. And I finally realized that he wanted me to have peace. And all the evil that is in the world and that I was partnering with, it's not what he wanted to give me. And he wanted to give me a future and a hope that really just struck a chord with me. And then just throughout the last couple years, just studying the armor of God and just studying what it means to be Christ-like. Because you have too many people in this world. The image of a Christian is so smeared now because there's bad Christians. Just like there's bad football players, there's bad Christians. They don't show who they represent well. You have a Christian that twists the gospel to their own standards, to accommodate their own beliefs and their structures of things that they don't want to give up. You have people that overbear and overpush because they don't understand the simplicity of the gospel. And the simplicity of the gospel is to love. You constantly hear that Christians are supposed to be loving. I can love you, but not have to agree with your standard of living. I can still be your friend, and I can still be a part of a situation or a moment and not be consumed by world thoughts. Let me rephrase it like this. I can love you, and I will show you love in the way that I believe Christ shows love, and that is constant encouragement. I came from a place where a lot of the people that I had in my life as far as adults would push certain things on me, like religion-wise, and it being forced down my throat. I couldn't grab onto the concept because I didn't understand, and it was just like, you better do this or you're going to hell. You better live this way or you're going to hell. If you keep doing this, you're going to go to hell. That standard does not work a lot, in my opinion. So it was, I want to learn how to be like Christ, and I want to show that in my character, and I want to show that in the way I live, in the choices that I make, and anything that comes to me. I want to represent the true nature of who Christ really is. We had read in 2 Corinthians 5:17, "Therefore if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new." So in the moment where I finally decided to rededicate myself, I was leaving whatever identity I created for Keys behind, because it was no longer me. I was no longer living with the world. I had been reborn. I had became a new creation in Christ. Anything that I had done in the past to harm others, to hurt myself, it was gone. And I decided to really grasp on the fact that now I can establish the character that I'm meant to establish and push that forward. So those are the three main scriptures that have really carried me throughout this journey the last 3 years, almost 4 years, because I'd like to say, yeah, I've been a Christian my whole life, but I haven't really represented Christ and lived for him fully until 2021. And my testimony doesn't stop. My testimony is still carrying on because I'm a father of 2 boys, and I'm also a husband, and I have a responsibility now to raise them, to provide for them, to be the priest of my home, and I still struggle with certain things. So this Sunday, our pastor had referenced Ephesians 5:11 through 17, and it says, "And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore he says, Awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. In that moment, too, on Sunday, Pastor had mentioned, in order to expose darkness, you have to put light on it. And we have a responsibility as Christians to do that. And I have a responsibility as a father to do that for my children. I have a responsibility as a husband to do that for my wife. And I have a responsibility for myself to keep my light on the darkness around me so that I don't partner with that. And we're not supposed to entertain those things or make altars with those things. We shouldn't be careless in our actions and our words. And it relates to how I wanted to establish myself and my identity in Christ. There comes a point where either you get it or you don't. And the purpose for this, I think, is everyone has a story. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the worst upbringing. You could be somebody who went to church and got saved at 8 years old, and that's your testimony. It doesn't matter. But I feel like I have a purpose. My story means something, and I know that there's people out there that have gone through the same things. And I can relate to them, or they can relate to me. And I just want to bring my story, my testimony on where God has brought me through, where he's bringing me towards. That's the main thing, is I just fully want to live for him. It's something that I don't hold lightly. I want to be humble and just really show people that I really care about them. And what better way to do that than to share my story? I mean, now you're part of the story. You're part of this podcast, man. So you're part of my life. And I think your story is significant too, and it's really going to touch people as well. So
I'll come off the bat saying I'm not as well spoken as you. So if anybody is sitting there expecting an eloquent demonstration, you're not gonna just restart the podcast, okay?
I'm sure you're gonna be fine, man. Like, I'm not as good as you think that I am.
I'm worse than you think that I am. So.
No, you're all right, man.
So our stories are a little different, but in a way I align to a lot of what you were saying, especially your upbringing. I grew up in a split household as well. I'd see my mom a couple weekends a month. I was with my dad majority of the time. He did a lot of working, to provide. I had different stepmothers growing up, so roles are constantly changing. And he was always working, and he was always present when he wasn't working. He made sure to, he was always at my games and things like that. But I kind of was left to my own devices growing up. Stepmom didn't necessarily want to deal with me, or was too busy working as well. Depends on which one we're talking about.
So it was like, oh, Griffin's just doing this. Like, I'll just leave him be. He's not bothering me, type thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And I have younger siblings, but again, I'd only see them, ever so often. So majority of the time, I was alone. So aside from moving a bunch, alongside of moving a bunch, it was kind of hard to find solitude wherever I was because I didn't know if it was permanent or not.
Yeah.
I'd see my mom every other weekend. She moved a bit as well. I grew up in a house, moved from there, lived in another house, moved from there, went back to the original house, lived in an apartment, lived in another house, moved to Ohio, moved back to Texas, moved to New York. And since I've been in New York, I've moved like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
But going back to what I was saying about relating to a lot of what you said, and that's, I guess, not being content with who you are as a person and trying to find your happiness in other people, and specifically women. Always feeling like, I guess, growing up with lack of attention, being alone for so long, I didn't have that, so I was searching for that. I was definitely the class clown too. I'm sure you guys can tell by all the dumb things I say on this podcast. But whenever I'd get any attention from a woman, I would latch onto that. And that's an issue I'm embarrassed to even say, but it is. It's a real issue. It's who I am, unfortunately.
Would you say it was a sense of like being comfortable? Like you found your...
I found someone who saw me, who I felt saw me in a different light than everyone else has, right? And it made the way I was feeling and the way my mindset was completely different. Because even up until, really, up until 6 months ago, my mind brings me to really dark places depending on different situations.
Yeah.
So when I'm with somebody and I perceive things as going good, I get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I start to let off the pedal a little bit. I start to do things I enjoy doing, watching football, gaming, listening to music, going to the gym. But then something happens, and it's kind of an issue within myself. Is my mind has always gotten the best of me, always.
Do you think that is in relation to the fact that you are constantly moving, so you were never settled? Like there was never a sense of security because you were constantly jumping from place to place. Do you think that blends in with that?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, it's like I have aspirations and goals, but at what point am I going to actually start accomplishing them? I'm trying to change up the way I'm doing things now, because before, like I said, I would see something, and I'd latch, and now it's really I'm doing a 180. I'm taking my time, I guess you could say. My mind was really my worst enemy, and it still is in a way. And this is what I mean by our stories are a little different. Keys is going to tell you that he changed in 2021 with his son, and having responsibility and a wife and a kid. Things change. He had a moment. My story is a little different, as I don't know if I can say I'm 100% there yet, because I still do things I shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into how I got to this point, I guess, and then we can delve more into that.
Yeah.
So how I got to this point, I'd been in a relationship most recently about 3 years, and things went south, and I had to leave, and I was living in a situation I didn't love. And I remember, I think it was like a February night, me and Keys were hanging out a lot at the time. I was over at your house more than anywhere, really. I think I was there like 3 or 4 nights a week. I was eating dinner with you guys, and I remember texting you. And I'm like, "Hey man, you mind if I come over and talk to you real quick?" And Keys had just gotten off work. He's like just worked all day. He's feeding the dog, feeding the kids, hanging out with the kids, and he still made time to come out and talk to me. So that speaks to your character, honestly. So he comes out there, talks to me for like a half hour, and I feel bad for even keeping him for that long, But I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm in a really dark spot. Just things aren't going right for me. Well, I asked him, I said, how do you deal with all this stuff, man? How do you deal with the day-to-day vices? And like he said, the approach that was given to him didn't work. That the hellfire and brimstone thing did not work for Keys, and it would not have worked for me either. But he told me, how he dealt with things and how he dealt with all the stresses of the world. And that was, through his faith. But he didn't necessarily say you have to do this if you want to solve these issues. He wasn't forcing that, He was very subtle about it. He gave me an example of how he did it. So then we were going to the gym all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were going...
2 to 3 days a week?
Yeah, I was in there a lot. Because, I needed some place to spend time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sitting there at home with all these thoughts running through my head, it wouldn't have been good for me. And honestly, between work and the gym, that's what I used to get my mind off things. And I remember clear as day where we were standing and everything. It was by the chest machine there.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I feel some kind of pull to go back to church, and it's either I'm going to do this or I'm going to do something really stupid and mess my life up somehow. That was pretty much my crossroads. And
Yeah.
this was So this was like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So not even that long ago. And he thought that was awesome. You know, he was glad to hear it. You could tell he seemed relieved because he knew the struggles I was dealing with, the dark thoughts I was having, because he experienced things like it. You know.
I think there was a moment before that moment. I think it was like a week before where you had looked at me. We had just got done doing a set of something. And you were like, "Dude, why do you hang out with me?"
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like
I was like, why do you know, because Keys doesn't cuss, doesn't drink, listens to good music. I cuss. I try not to, but it's very difficult. And not to go off topic here, this podcast isn't for surface level stuff. I'm not here for that. You're getting raw, like, conversation here, raw thoughts. So
I'm trying to show authenticity.
Yeah, so I'm really opening up right now. So this is stuff really Keys has only heard, and maybe a couple other people. But anyways, I cussed, I drank. Keys didn't drink, Keys didn't cuss. Keys listened to good music, I listened to awful stuff. And I looked at him, I'm like, dude, why do you hang out with me? Like, what?
Right. Well, you partied with me for a little bit.
Too. Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that too. You from then to now, it's just night and day, man. I'm proud of you. Like,
appreciate that.
I knew who you were before this, with the long hair, playing beer pong in the garage, and you're just a totally different person, man. You're a role model, and you're an excellent father.
Appreciate that.
So,
bro. I love you, man.
It's really inspiring. Love you too, bro. It's really inspiring to see. So yeah, I asked him, like, what are you doing hanging out with me? Because I didn't want to start being a negative influence on Keys. Not to say that he's the type of person who can be influenced, but I don't want him to have to. I don't want to put him in a situation where he's like, oh, I like Griffin, but he's doing things I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull away from this. And he never did that. He would silently disagree with it, but he showed me grace through it, and I'm sure he prayed for me in moments I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
It led to our friendship becoming even stronger over time. And then one day, I had this. I said I wanted to go to church. I didn't actually do it. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, hey, I'd like to go. I'm thinking about going to church. I'm gonna go one or two ways I'd like to go. He thought that was awesome. I was sitting at home, and he texted me, and this was a Friday night. He's like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, just sitting here listening to music. He's like, oh, do you wanna come down to church? We're having a monthly worship night. And I'm like, sure, I'll go try that. So I did.
That's thanks to my wife. She was the one that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tori was the one who actually extended that invite.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if he's ready.
Yeah.
And she's like, just ask him. And that just goes to show you that my wife, I love you, Tori, her discernment is really, really good. And husbands, you should listen to your wives every once in a while.
So I ended up going. I hadn't been in a church. I think, how old am I now? I was 26 at the time. So it had been 10 plus years since I'd been in a church. Everybody's coming up to me saying hi, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. So I went through that, set by Keys because I didn't know anybody in there. People kept asking me, are you coming back? Are you coming this Sunday? That kind of thing. And I said, yeah. Well, let me tell you what happened and why I didn't go that Sunday. I went out Saturday night to the bars because that was my lifestyle, was just going to work, going to the gym. Friday, Saturday night, when I wasn't hanging out with Keys, I was drinking, partying, spending money, and hanging out with people who had no interest in my betterment. People I didn't know, obviously. And that Saturday night was the worst night I experienced in a long time. And I remember waking up Sunday morning at like 11 o'clock. I knew church started at like 10. And I text Keys, I'm like, bro, please don't hate me, dude. I didn't even explain to him why. I'm sure he knew. But that was just, I didn't want him to to be disappointed, I guess. I'm like, dude, yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I ended up making it the next Sunday. I haven't missed very many since then. My story doesn't end there. You know, I'm still a heavy work in progress. Let me share a verse with you and I'll explain to you why it's significant to me. This is 1 Corinthians 10 out of the New King James Version. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to men, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. So why this is so significant to me, and that you only know this, is I almost lost it, bro. Like, I really almost lost it. I was being led down a very, very dark path with what I was consuming through music. I didn't realize what I was doing, you know? So I was listening to a group called Sleep Token. If anyone out there is listening, you can probably attest to just how talented this group is. And on the surface, it just seems like another band, but it's so much more than that. I've never heard lyrics like this. I've never heard instruments like this. I've never heard a vocalist like this. I aligned myself and everything I'd gone through this year with everything they were saying. I can recite lyrics right now that were relevant to what I was going through. On the surface, like I said, it seemed harmless. Yeah. But you do some digging and you see their intentions aren't so innocent, right?
Right.
And I had a click moment last week. I had a click moment that this music was making me feel the way worship music would at church.
It's powerful.
Right? I mean, this music it's how I felt. Like, when I especially when I first started going, again, you know, it felt powerful. Like, this music is moving. And I've never had another artist or group do that to me. You know, I used to love The Weeknd. But it wasn't to the point where I was listening to them every day, every hour, on the way home, to work, in the shower. And I know this sounds dumb, but it's like, this was consuming me. I was being, like, some of their lyrics, I was altered. And that's a piece that I'm going to delve into at a later date, as to just how music can move you. It's like a secret thing. Music it's a secret weapon. You know, it seems so innocent, but it can really pull you in a direction you didn't anticipate yourself going. So I sat down in this room, we're recording this podcast, and I told Keys, because he knew I still listened to him. He's not stupid, but he didn't know how bad it was. And I haven't listened to him since that day we talked.
Yeah.
And I have felt so much better. I can tell you this, had I continued listening, I wouldn't be recording this podcast, this episode specifically. I didn't want to go to church anymore. I felt fake going to church, because what I didn't know was this music was essentially worshiping something else.
Yeah.
So, unbeknownst to me, I was fake. You know, I was going to church for what reason? What purpose was I serving there? Because I wasn't worshiping. I wasn't listening. You know, I didn't want to go. And now that I put that out there, and I'm so glad I put that out there, because I don't know where my path would have gone.
Yeah. And
I say all this to say, just because you feel that you were going down the right path, all it takes is something simple to derail you. I mean, who would have thought that a music group could do that, or something simple like that? But I'm here to say it does. You know, it can. And like I said, this is going to be a very raw and real podcast. We're going to talk about things that might make people uncomfortable, might make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We might overshare.
Yeah. I
don't really care, to be honest. I really don't. I mean,
no.
This is all temporary. I don't care what I overshare, you know.
Exactly.
I don't care how it makes me look. I'm not ashamed. I'm going to get better. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to walk better with my faith.
Yeah, that's right, man.
And at the end of the day, it's just constant improvement. You know, that's all it is.
It's not worrying about yesterday or tomorrow. It's focusing on the present and growing from that, and actually relying on the fact that there might be times that you mess up, but like we've learned through our pastor is that we're supposed to live in the Spirit. And if you continuously make the effort to live in the Spirit, your chances of falling into sin are a lot less. You just being obedient and opening up last week brought so much relief to you. And that's what it's about. It's about being obedient. Because if I wouldn't have gave God my yes, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. For one, another act of obedience that I didn't even hit on in like my time was I had recently lost a friend of mine. We had been talking like continuously. We're in my fantasy football league, so we would talk just about football. And I remember when my friend passed, I made God a promise that I would never not share the gospel to people that I love, and even strangers if I had the chance to. And I remember sitting at my desk, and God reminded me of that promise, and at that point I just told myself I don't care anymore what anyone thinks. I'm just doing it. And I invited you to men's group, and that was the start of me trying to not pull you into this lifestyle or this way of living, but it was just me being obedient and listening to the voice of God and deciding to do something that he was telling me to do. And in that, it created a whole domino effect. My yes in that moment brought you to your yes. And you guys out there, you don't know the impact on the decisions that you make until you make them. Right or wrong, there's always repercussions or consequences. The consequences are great. They can be good, they can be bad, but everything that we do and decide is of importance. And both of our stories are just getting started, man. You sell yourself short because you are a very hardworking man. You're very set on a firm foundation of what you want and what you want to commit yourself to. And you're a fantastic friend. You listen. You make me laugh, dude. I love it. I love spending time with you, man. And this is an outlet that I think is going to reach and touch many people. And your story and your walk is significant. And the things that you go through, there's things that you've gone through and things that you know that I will never know. And that could help me, and it can help people out there. So it's just the beginning, man.
I have one more verse I wanted to share that is something that I'd like to live by, or, an example of what I want my mind to be.
Yeah.
That's Romans 8, verse 6. It's the mind governed by flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. I touched on battling with thoughts, and I still do to this day. But my pastor says if you can control your thought life, what can be done to you? I mean, that's half the battle is you have these thoughts and you just say, those aren't my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
man.
And don't listen to them if they are negative. And that's easier said than done. I mean, I'm an example of that. It's something to remind yourself of daily is like, I am in control of what I am thinking. And oftentimes, if you're not, what you're thinking is going to be what you're speaking.
Yeah.
If nothing but wicked comes out of your mouth, then how do you expect anything around you
to be fruitful? Yeah.
Exactly. So,
sitting over there preaching, brother. No, man. I just like to emphasize again, I know we've said it a few times, there's no script here.
No.
So even in our stories, we might sound silly, things might get mixed up. It doesn't matter, because we're just being raw and real, and it's not scripted. I'm not sitting here with a notebook asking Griffin questions. We're just trying to show you that it's possible to be open and raw, and it's just possible to be real and to not care.
Yeah, because I know at the end of the day, this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I hope you feel the same. I hope you feel secure in this.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, who
feel
cares,
good.
man?
I mean, there could have been way more detail and stuff, but what was supposed to be said was said. I'm excited, man. And you can experience the fact that there's two men, young men, both different sides of the spectrum. We got a single man who's 27, and we got a man who's 28 with 2 kids and is married.
Yeah.
And
it's a unique dynamic for sure.
yeah, and we love one another. We both have a heart for people. We both love football. We both want to always do better. We always want to strive to goals, and even just doing this podcast is a goal of both of ours, and we're so excited to see where this is gonna take us and where it's gonna bring people.
I just had a kind of a revelation. Is like, you know, we set out to do this for the betterment of the people we love, and ourselves. You know, we want to ease the stresses of society. We want to give back to the community. We want to put people in positions where they don't have to do as much. You know, but also just having these conversations. You know, even if nothing comes out of it, but the fact that it's me, you, and a mic, I think it's worth so much.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
I agree.
I think we're gonna end it there. If you guys want to hear more episodes like this, and also the episodes we do with football related content, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, follow. Even if you don't follow or subscribe, what we really want is just to be able to communicate with people. So if you just want to leave comments, you want to leave thoughts on what we should talk about, things that you may be struggling with, if you want us to hit on certain topics, we just want to get feedback. We just want to hear from people. Even if it's one person, it's all that matters. It's souls and more souls for the kingdom. And yeah.
Love you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.